All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to the session this afternoon. I know there's a lot of discussion around cybersecurity, networking, etc. We're going to take a little bit of a tangent here and talk about AI. And before we get started, I'll introduce myself. So I'm with a company called ElevateIT. So we're headquartered out in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have an office here in Houston and one in Dallas. But I'm the executive leader of our data management and analytics practice. I'm the executive team. I kind of oversee that group, as well as I'm the chief growth officer for the company. I'm also a senior fellow for the CDO-IQ Symposium. So if you're really interested in data, I've got an opportunity for you here. I'll talk about that in the next slide, and then I'll remind you. We have a booth out on the floor, so you can meet out there and you can have questions. We should have some time before the end of this for some Q&A. I'll try to save some time. All right, so the agenda for today's discussion is really around data and around AI and making AI meaningful. So we're going to talk about the context imperative. Context really matters. You've got to have a data foundation as well, so there's got to be some plumbing in there. But context sitting on top of plumbing. So we're going to decode that. A little distraction there with the service folks. I'm going to give you a use case that will make it all make sense. I want to be able to break it down in a way that you can take this back and understand it. So that's going to show you context in action. And then we'll talk about really the contextual intelligence layer in the data ecosystem that really makes agentic AI possible. And then we'll wrap up with a summary and have some Q&A. So before we get into the discussion, I want to ask if anybody here is familiar with the word autonomous. Okay. Somebody tell me, what does autonomous mean? Just, I don't know. What is that? To act on its own, right? What's a great example of autonomous action in our society today is the Waymo driverless automobile. That makes sense? Yeah. We've all seen them around Houston. Hopefully we haven't gotten into an accident and run over by one. But we as humans are rapidly getting to the point where we will trust an autonomous vehicle to drive us throughout the city of Houston. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? The reason why that vehicle can do that is because it is driven and powered by AI. And the AI that powers that vehicle has a very robust contextual intelligence layer sitting on top of a lot of data and a large language model, or a series of large language models that are processing the context in real time and adjusting and making decisions and reasoning for the fastest path to the destination, the safest path to the destination, and the time to the destination, etc. So we are already witnessing a very significant disruption in a very short period of time. First, we saw Uber disrupt the taxi business, and now we're seeing Uber's driver ranks being disrupted by autonomous vehicles that don't require drivers. So we see autonomy happening in a lot of areas, and this is all possible because of context, and that's what we're going to talk about. So today's data cloud framework, you might be familiar with it in terms of the old terminology of data warehouse or a data lake, but that data cloud framework is really a place where we are able to take information and data from our production systems over here, so systems like our CRM, MRP, HRM, ERP, etc., and pump that data into a secondary replicated data lake, if you will, and then curate it when it gets in there. So take it in as raw data, just replicate it right in there, and then to do some integration and some cleansing and store that data in something we call the silver zone, and that's really data that's useful for insight, and then really to curate that data all the way to its certified data sets that we can use to produce things like financial reporting, etc. And that's in the gold zone. And of course, each layer of that ecosystem that you move over to the right is a little bit more expensive to create and curate and maintain, right? But then that data is ready, and we have the certified data sets that we can then use here through APIs or direct access to that for visualizations, dashboards, to create some data products, to do data science work, and to share data with partners. So we can consume that data. That's the consumption side of the layer, and that's been around for some years. Okay, but now we're moving to a world where something else is necessary. So before we talk about that, we want to talk about how this all has come together and where we are today. So we start out with data assets, as we talked about. Those are those core data elements. The next step in the data management journey is data platform engineering. So that's how we integrate the data, replicate it, land it, cleanse it, store it, etc. Then we have data lifecycle management, which is where we do validation between the zones. We do some literacy. We do legacy. We do data observability to watch the quality as it moves from the source systems into the data warehouse or the data cloud, and then we kind of manage that environment. And then we have to put governance around it, right? So data governance is to make sure that everybody who's accessing data is accessing the right data. They have the privacy constraints placed around that data, security is there, we're managing the sensitivity of our data, et cetera. And at that point, now we have a data ecosystem that's ready for consumption. So these green boxes represent the consumption layer of our data. So you see data insights that come in the form of executive dashboards, cross-functional metrics, and reporting. You also see advanced models for intelligent systems like AI and machine learning systems, prescriptive analytics, and early warning indicators that can be generated from that data and trusted. And then we have consumption layer, which is really where we can do self-service analytics, power the modeling, do data science work, and even sell our data to monetize it in the sense of data monetization. So those are really the key components, and that's kind of the state of the art before we get to the agentic age. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Everybody tracking with me? All right. But there's a paradigm shift that's necessary. It's happening right now, and the Waymo driverless vehicle is an example of that, one of the best examples of that. And that paradigm shift says that the objective, we had an objective of democratizing data so that any business user could make faster decisions. They could get to data where needed, when needed, and in the form needed, so they can consume that in a report or dashboard, make better business decisions, and keep the business trains moving on time. But in that world, we had a human-centric paradigm. The human was in the center of that. They were applying context and reasoning. They were using tools like Power BI and Tableau or data objects, business objects, and other tools like that. And they were doing manual interpretation of the data. But the secret here is that the humans are bringing the logic and they're applying the context into the data to make the decision. So between the information being reported and the decision being taken is the human doing reasoning. And we're going to talk about that. That's really important. So the consumption patterns are where the paradigm is shifting today. And we're moving from dashboards that inform decision-making humans to executing decisions made autonomously by AI. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, we know we can get there because if we can let a car drive us around without a driver, then autonomous operation is possible in lanes and avenues of our business that we never would have imagined just 5 short years ago. This is all happening fast. So now the users are starting to have a shift in expectation. They want something different, right? And like this is my pointer. You can see it in one hand here, and it's a really nice pointer. I think I paid like $89 for this pointer. It's got this, changes the slides, it lets you use the pointer on the screen. But I hadn't used it in a while. So when I found it in my bag to bring it for today's presentation, I thought, well, how do I charge this thing? Well, how do I make sure that it's docked to my new laptop? And so I thought, well, I don't even know where the instruction manual is for this. Let me just take a picture of it and ask ChatGPT. So I took a picture of the pointer, and it wasn't a very good picture either. But you could make it out. You couldn't tell the brand name or anything. I sent it to ChatGPT, and it came back and told me what device it was, to pull out the end, to stick in a USB-C charging port. It would take 1 hour to charge it. It would take 1 minute to charge it for 3 hours, and then within an hour to be charged for 3 weeks. And it told me what each button did. It reminded me of all of that. And so I had the answer right there in probably 3 minutes of what to do with my pointer. You guys can tell I'm using it the way it's supposed to use, right? So that's all new information, but that's what the expectations are shifting to. And so whether you're serving up capabilities like that in your business or not, your consumers are experimenting and using AI to accelerate their outcomes to help them drive decisions. Does that make sense? So, but this is the world of the past was dashboards. This is the dashboard that we built for our client, his first student. That's a transit company that runs buses. school systems. And they needed a dashboard to tell them what probability existed for a certain number of drivers over the number of drivers required to drive a certain fixed number of buses. Let's say there were 50 routes. That would require 50 drivers. But on any given day of the year, some percentage of those drivers are not going to show up. So they had to overbook drivers in order to ensure that every bus could leave the station and go on its route every day. And so they would overbook like maybe 10 drivers on a schedule of 50. They would have to pay those 60 drivers for showing up. But then some days, they would only need 2 of the 10 overbooked drivers. So they were paying for 8 additional drivers that they didn't use. It's very inefficient. So they needed a way to understand to predict the probability of any given calendar day of the school year, how many drivers were likely not to show up for work so they could optimize the overbooking. And this is a similar problem for airlines, for example, right? And so we built a dashboard for that. But that's the past now. The shift is to a new paradigm, and the new paradigm says that the business user wants to converse with the data. They just want to have a natural language conversation with the data, and they want the system to pull the data, apply the context, interpret the data, visualize it, and to suggest actions. In some cases, they want the system to take the actions. And that's exactly what Waymo does with its cars. Or if you have a Tesla with autopilot, when you turn the autopilot on, it's making the decisions and it's implementing the actions. And that's where we're headed, right? We want to get there at scale, and so that's really important. But what stands between where you are today in your data warehouse and your production systems and the ability to, at scale, deploy agentic AI solutions that you can trust at the level of trust that we give a driverless car? Does that make sense? And that's what our C-suite expects. That's what they need. How many of you have senior executive leaders you hear around your companies that are really pushing for more AI, we should use AI? By show of hands, if your company is asking for AI. Quite a few hands are going up here. Not all of them, but quite a few. Now, if you're in an industry where your competitors get there first, what does that mean you're doing? Leading, following, or getting out of the way? Which choice would you pick?
Going bankrupt.
Going bankrupt. There are some companies that may be doing some of that. Spirit Airlines, we don't know what American Airlines or some of the other JetBlue airlines were doing in optimizing their schedules, but we know that Spirit is no longer here. So those are the expectations. So now we get to this agentic world where we have a new consumer. The consumer is suddenly not human. Now, this is where I have to be honest with the audience, and Justin has heard me be honest 3 times earlier today. But if I'm not honest with you, then you won't understand what I'm about to say. So my honesty is to tell you that I'm 68 years old. That's the truth. I was born in 19... Round of applause for me. Oh, I love that. I love that. Give the flowers to the person while they're still here, right? But why I tell you that is because I started my IT career in 1975. And in 1975, we were processing punch paper tape and paper cards for data processing. Some of us know that, right? Don't raise your hands if you were there, but you know I'm telling the truth. And I've seen everything from punch paper tape and paper cards with 80 characters to agentic AI solutions in just a short 52 years of my life. We've come a long way. The mainframe that I ran when I was a 17-year-old high school student going to my senior year had less computing power by an order of magnitude than this device has. And I keep this in my pocket. So what I want to say is, in all of the evolution of the changes in technology, day by day that I've watched over my career, we've always needed more humans to implement the innovations. We've always needed more humans until agentic AI. So for the first time in the history of IT, the demand curve for software engineers and other technologists is actually trending down. I've never seen that before. What does that mean? And how do we address it and how do we deal with it in terms of enabling the future. Now, there are some really wise, I think, IT leaders who see the opportunity to reposition how they train, skill, and utilize the human in the loop or the human on the loop in the AI, in the agentic AI world. And right now, we're kind of on a slow boat to China in terms of getting AI and agentic AI deployed at scale. If you think it's happening fast now, we're on the slow boat. Next year, we're going to speed up a whole lot, because we're speeding up a lot from last year to this year. Last year, we proposed to do, we're a consulting company, we proposed to write a construction project management platform, a complete ecosystem for a client. And the deal was going to be $500,000 to write the software, and it was going to take about 6 months. Last year, they put it on hold. They came back to us earlier this year. We did the same project for $225,000 with 1/4 of the software engineers using Google's anti-gravity and Claude code. Same project last year, we could do this year for about 1/3 of the price that the client had to pay last year. And that's just in 1 year. So that's how fast things are changing. We've slowed the pace of hiring. We haven't laid off people, but we've slowed the pace of hiring because we can do more with the workforce that we already have because of AI. And it's not because of AI in general, it's because of agentic AI. And that's what I'm talking to you guys about, how do you enable that. So the agent in the new consumer space that we have now, data, they need to reason plus act. Reasoning is a uniquely human facility until the world we're about to enter as we go into next year. Agents require situational awareness in business context, just like the Waymo automobile requires traffic awareness in situational context. You need to know who it's carrying, where it's carrying those people, and what the traffic situation is around it. Much like humans, these agents make reasoning decisions and act and take action, and that's in the Nirvana of it all. So we're rapidly moving from co-pilots like Microsoft Copilot, sort of assisting a human, to this agentic world where the agent is actually doing the job. And we're trying to figure out where we can do that. So reasoning is the core of intelligence, and I want to talk about what reasoning is. Reasoning is the understanding of information. It's really taking in facts and contextualizing them, putting a context around the facts and the dimensions of the data as the first step. And we do that without even knowing we're doing that as humans, right? We have experience, we have our filters, and those filters allow us to process and contextualize information. It's also about recognizing relationships, so seeing patterns and associations, seeing cause and effects relationships. Like if you're dating and you had a bad relationship in the past with somebody that you were dating, and you meet this new person, but you start to observe signs and patterns of behavior that sort of feel like this relationship you had that went south. Then you begin to make decisions with this new potential relationship based on your past experience. And that's an example of seeing patterns and associations and applying a cause and effect thinking structure to how you're processing information. Then we apply logic. And in reasoning, we use rules or principles to evaluate what follows next. It's a cause and effect world, right? So we use these rules and experiences and these principles to predict what we think is going to happen next. And then we draw conclusions, right? And conclusions are about deciding what is likely true and what action to take based on the situation. Now, your Tesla on autopilot is doing that every second. My boss, who's the CEO and founder of the company, has a Tesla. He likes to drive us from city to city with that autopilot on, looking at me and instead of the road, and it freaks me out, because I'm like, dude, you're sitting at the driver's seat, the steering wheel, it's changing lanes, and it's I don't know what it's doing, but it hasn't created a problem yet, right? And he's 100% confident, not looking out the windshield, but looking at me, and I'm not. So I'm looking out the windshield for him, but I'm old school. He's younger than me. Okay, so the agentic world order requires a little bit more. And so here's what it is. Today's approach to data management falls short. So if you've got a robust data warehouse platform and environment, flat for yourself, you've got a foundation, but it's not where you need to be in order to deploy agentic AI. So if everybody's clamoring for that in your organization, they got to make a few more investments to make sure that you can do that at scale with the trustability of a Waymo or a Tesla. Okay. Now, I don't know. Does anybody in here drive an electric vehicle from Ford Motor Company? Anybody in the room? Okay. Any Teslas in the room? Few Teslas, no Fords. Okay. So Ford has some problems with their autopilot. You know, their assisted driving. It's not quite as perfected in their ecosystem as it is in the Tesla. I'll just throw that out there, not to dissuade you from buying Ford, you know, and getting their drive assist option on it. But I think that the contextual layer of their architecture may be a little bit weaker. Okay. So anyway, today's approach focuses on the what, the facts in the data, not the why. Also, it is really about snapshots of data, not continuous streaming, and it lacks the context that's necessary, so it's not primed for agentic consumption. So if you have a data warehouse or a data cloud, you're on the path, but you need to do some work in order to get over that finish line. So I want to give you an example before I talk about this framework for context, for the contextual layer of your world. I want to give you a use case to kind of hammer this concept home. Okay, so imagine you're a telecommunications company, and Sarah calls to cancel her internet service. Okay, she's just not happy. So here's the raw data elements that would be pulled up by the customer service rep or an agent if we just have this layer. There's her customer ID. Her spend is $120 a month. Her contract status is month to month, so she doesn't have a long-term committed contract with us. And so she calls and she wants to cancel, so we create a support ticket and it says cancel her service. Sarah's not happy, so we're going to go ahead and cancel. So AI's logic without context, Sarah is a month-to-month customer with low digital engagement. Let's cancel. Okay? There's no context, just the facts, right? She's on the phone, she wants to cancel, you pull up her account, she doesn't have a contract, she can cancel. Let her off the phone. But now, imagine this high-value customer cancellation scenario where there's a little bit of a different situation. Imagine Sarah calls, but there's a relationship context. Sarah isn't just a $120 a month customer, she's CEO of a local startup. They have a $50,000 enterprise contract with the firm. So she's pretty valuable. So the sentiment is that her last 3 support calls were about intermittent outages during peak hours, and the notes say she was highly frustrated. Highly frustrated. So a competitor just launched a fiber for startups promotion in her specific zip code yesterday. So now we've got this portfolio risk associated with Sarah who called to cancel. So the business logic now is the company has a rule, never lose a B2B decision maker even on their personal accounts. So this is an example of context. If an AI agent had access to this information, it would make a fundamentally different decision, right? So it's going through this process. So here we see that under traditional AI, which is data only, which is where a lot of people are doing these AI initiatives and they're falling down, they're never getting to production because they're failing. They don't have a contextual intelligence layer associated with them. They're just building an LLM and putting the thing out there in the wild. I process your cancellation, have a nice day. We'll offer a $10 generic discount, and that's going to follow the standard retention workflow. But if you have a context layer, an AI agent with a context layer, I see you have 3 outages lately. I've alerted our regional tech lead to fix the node in your area by 5 p.m. Offers a VIP bundle, executive bundle, that syncs her home and office reliability together, so it gives her a guarantee, and it triggers a white glove escalation to the enterprise account manager. So that's a fundamentally different experience that can be created if that contextual intelligence layer has been engineered and deployed as a foundation for your deployment. So now let's talk about the layer. Let's get into it. Is everybody comfortable, though, for understanding what the contextual layer can do functionally for your AI? Yep. Anybody not? No? Okay. All right. So the foundation for contextual intelligence. So, first you have to build the data foundation, establishing raw technical retrieval mechanism, building a data plot. Then you have to have structural meaning, which is the reasoning map, and that's going to deal with semantics, entity resolution, knowledge graphs, and cognitive maps. So those are some technical terms, but I'm going to make it pretty simple for you to understand as we go forward on the next few slides. But that's what the context layer consists of, and that has to be built into the ecosystem. And then that allows for dynamic intelligence, which is real-time operational state for permission to act. It allows the organization's agents to really use active metadata, real-time health and freshness signals on that information that is being provided to it, and to take advantage of a temporal state, understanding the context in real time for what decisions have to be made for the best business outcome. So we're going to talk about those 4 items in the shaded block on the next few slides. But before we do, I just want to give you this sort of really baseline understanding of the data, right? So the technical plumbing here, these are fields in the database. And everybody's got fields in the database. You've got a data warehouse, you've got fields in the database. The semantic meaning translates these, very abstract discussions or very concrete, fact-based labels, right, into business meaning. So semantic meaning. This is monthly recurring revenue. This is a 4-year loyalty milestone. This 1460, and this B2B decision maker is if this entity flag is true, it really means it's a B2B decision maker. Okay, so if we add this kind of intelligence to the data, then we can enable these kinds of use cases inside the organization. Does that make sense? Okay. So entity resolution is the first thing, and this has been around, for a long time. If you are familiar with database marketing and the concept of householding, you have a lot of different customers, and you're trying to figure out which ones are all really the same household within your customer base. So that entity resolution by different names has been done over decades, really now, in the form of householding. But this is kind of a network node map here that you see. But that's the concept of really identifying when different data records across siloed systems refer to the same real world entity, the same customer, Mark Johnson. It might be in the system as M. Johnson, M.I. Johnson, Mark.J, and that's all me, right? So one person. And then, what we have here is siloed fragmentation. We need to recognize that Sarah Smith in the CRM is S. Smith, who's in the billing system, who is Sarah at startup.com. That's the same person, right? And Sarah at startup.com happens to be the CEO there. So that's the same person, not 3 different customers. And that allows us to create what we call the golden record. And that, in data warehousing terminology, is kind of like the concept of master data management, right? Mastering the customer record so that you have a uniquely identified customer across all the different touch points in your ecosystem. So without any resolution, the AI agent follows a standard script and treats the VIP like a stranger, just a person, right? You saw that in the example. But if you have entity resolution, the AI agent identifies a strategic partner opportunity and applies white glove treatment. So that's why it's really critical to do this step. The third step here is knowledge graphs. And knowledge graphs, transform isolated data points into connected node of entities, from the edge. So a knowledge graph can associate things together in a complete ecosystem to give you a total picture. And it allows you to do multi-hop reasoning. So you go from Sarah to an individual who is the CEO of a startup that she's a tier 1 partner category resource. That's hidden context. But if you have a knowledge graph, you can make all of those associations and then use that insight in the reasoning process. The second piece here that's really important in knowledge graphs is this idea of ontology. It's a word in data management that a lot of people struggle with, but it's pretty simple. Any CEO of a startup in our accelerator program is automatically a tier 1 stakeholder. That's an ontology. So we want to capture ontologies and get them out of the tribal knowledge space into the knowledge graph so that we can use that information in an agentic solution context. Now, a human would know that, right? If Mike was the person in the customer support center and he'd gone through training, the training would have told him this business ontology here. A CEO of a startup that's in our accelerator program is automatically a tier one stakeholder. So he would just have to check to see if she was in fact the CEO of a startup, and then he would know she was in a tier one. And a human would just know to do that. But an agent doesn't know to do that unless you give it the context so that it can automatically have that insight be generated. And then it's really grounding the truth. Now, who is the executive sponsor for her account? So now we want to make sure that she's not just canceling an individual account, she's the executive of a $50 million contract with a business client that we have. And so that account has an account executive. We want to make sure that the account executive, Marcus, is aware that she had this problem, but we saved the day, right? And so that he can go do that white glove treatment, go make a call on Sarah, make sure that she's happy with what we've done, give her an additional discount if she needs it, but to retain that business. Okay, so moving from search to really understanding, mapping how your business operates, right, is really the key here. And then finally, these cognitive maps, which the core concept of that is a knowledge graph, which is a map, which is a cognitive map of the navigation strategy, which really, this is the way that humans think through a problem. How do you take the thinking process that a human goes through and turn that into something that can be enabled to an agentic agent within your organization? So there's fast sequencing, right? We think through problems step by step. We kind of break it down from a complex business process to something that we can understand in bite-sized pieces, right? Like the VIP onboarding. If we're onboarding a VIP customer, what's step 1 to do that, step 2 to do that, step 3 to do that? We can capture that and then represent it in a cognitive map. And heuristic reasoning, and heuristic is one of those words that kind of scares people, but really means the shortest path to the decision. What is the fastest way to jump through steps, skip steps, and get to the right decision? So heuristic reasoning is that, here's an example, if a VIP account has a pending outage, ignore a standard AI troubleshooting script and trigger an immediate human-led escalation. Just jump right to the answer because we know who that person is and we need to make sure that we don't lose that account. And then a goal orientation is another context that the cognitive map will provide for the agentic solution, which is really, what is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to optimize for the best results. We always want to retain. So how do we make sure that every action that agent takes is focused on the ultimate goal, not a dead or the wrong outcome? So that's the idea of translating this tribal knowledge. Anybody in here in your organization run a lot of it by tribal knowledge? Now be honest, raise your hands. Is there a lot of tribal knowledge in your organization? Right. And I think everybody, I'm from the mainframe era, and we were all afraid when the mainframers got to be my age and started retiring, because they were taking all this quote-unquote tribal knowledge away from the organization. So how do we capture that? How do we retain it? How do we know how to run our systems when they're retired? Or how do we keep them all working like me and not let them retire? That's the other strategy. But that strategy is flawed because there's a time clock and it's ticking, right? Okay, but that tribal knowledge is a problem. So that's the context intelligence framework. So when you introduce that to the data cloud environment, you have something fundamentally different. You've changed the way your data environment looks, and this has worked. So now you have a new consumer, and that new consumer is the agent right here. Oops, sorry, I pushed the wrong button. Back up, like that. Push the wrong button, sorry about that. Can help me. All right, let's see.
Human error.
Yeah, that was human error. It was. I guess I don't know my pointer as well as I thought I did. All right, here we go. I was trying to push that button. So now we have agents, right? Now we can put agents into our ecosystem. But what we've done to the ecosystem is something different. We've introduced this contextual intelligence framework. We have semantics, entity resolution, knowledge graphs, and the cognitive maps. We've engineered that into the ecosystem, and we've introduced a large language model or a series of large language models in the foundation. Large language models alone can enable an agent to make very bad decisions. Large language models with a contextual intelligence framework sitting on top of them then will enable an agent to perform as desired. And that's where our organizations want to get to. And like I said, the most common example of that is the driverless vehicle. That is a practical example of a very rich and robust contextual intelligence layer sitting on top of a number of LLMs with agents behind the wheel. Okay? Let's see. Cool. So without context, data is just a statistical ghost. That's your data in the warehouse. Predictability to performance is where we want to move to. We want to move away from the guesses of standard LLMs. And every time you get an output from ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, develop a contextual intelligence layer, the word choices are the next most probable word, so you can get a number of hallucinations out of those solutions without context. We want to mitigate risk, so we want to be able to steer away from hallucinations so that we have structural memory within the ecosystem that allows us to build and deploy these agents. And we want to have scalability. We want to turn tribal knowledge into a machine asset so that we can deploy it at scale. And then we want to have trust, which is creating an auditable, secure framework for the agents to act. So at the end of the day, context layer is the difference between AI that chats, chatbots, and AI that actually does work, which can be done autonomously at scale. And that is really, at the end of the day, where we want the AI to be. So key takeaways from this talk. Data cloud is an essential foundation. You gotta have one. If you don't, you need to get your data house in order. You probably heard that. Let's see, context is key to establish that. If we want to have trust, the context layer enables reliable action, and the 4 core pillars of that are listed here. Oops, I hit the wrong button again. So we're gonna go back to the laptop and go back. Yeah, and then operational grounding. Agents must be rooted in verified facts, which is really the certification of the data governance and data quality disciplines that wrap themselves around your data warehouse so that your data is trusted, so it's accurate. So the last thing I want to end with here is another giveaway for you. This is our website. If you go to our website, there is a link there called the Value Calculator. The Value Calculator is shown here on the homepage. This is a completely complimentary tool for you to use. We built it for ourselves and we use it. It is a tool that allows us to work with a client. What's your name? Melissa. So let's say Melissa's a client and she wants to build an agentic AI solution. I'm just taking that because we're talking about it. And she contacts our firm and sits down and talk to her about doing it. So she's got some business outcomes that she wants to deliver to the business. And she's got a budget that she's established, and the business seems to support it, but there's no real concrete business case for that shows the ROI. So what this value calculator does is it allows Jason over there, to sit down with Melissa and walk her through a conversation around the elements that she has to generate a very polished, very well-researched ROI calculation that can be presented to the CFO. And they'll stand the rigor of it. And so we built this calculator, and it is here. It is an agentic solution. It's got an advisor agent, a business insight agent, a value driver agent, a cost driver agent, an ROI calculator, an ROI formatter, and a market research agent. So I answered a few questions just to get a little jumpstart idea here. It asked me what was I trying to build an ROI around. I said a new CRM. I am the IT director. We want to modernize our sales process and automate them. We have a 7-year time frame for the analysis. And so then the calculator went back and analyzed that and said, hello, it's great to meet you. Modernizing and automating sales processes for a new CRM is a fantastic initiative at a 7-year time frame gives us a solid window for analysis. To help me understand the context of your project better, could you tell me a little bit more about what industry your company operates in? And then it just goes through a dialogue like that, pulling information into this application. And these agents go to work, and at the end of the day, it builds up in the context window over there what it's doing. It will produce a PowerPoint, a very well-formatted, visual representation of the ROI with all the elements that went into it. And it's completely complementary. What it also showcases is our skill set at building agentic solutions. So we build for ourselves the kinds of things that we build for our clients in an automated workflow. Okay. Question? No question? Question?
On slide 27, you have the map of the data lake and all of that.
Yep.
With that context layer separated out of the data lake. Is that intentional? Is there a reason that we're keeping that data, that context data separate from the other data that we're using?
This piece here?
Yes. Is there a reason that context?
No, it's not. It's actually not separate. It is in the data cloud. Okay, so, but it's like, this is a graph database, for example, where you might have Snowflake sitting over here, or SQL Server.
Okay.
So we're using different technologies for the different components of that context layer. And that's why it sits there. And then this LLM foundation is not an LLM. It could be a series of LLMs that are for, fit for purpose for what you're deploying. Any other questions? Question? Oh, he was moving the puzzle pieces around. All right. Oh, in the back. Stand up and talk really loud because my ears are as old as my body.
I'm curious to know, I guess around these small to medium businesses, not necessarily super large businesses. Many of these medium-sized companies, like in the 500 to 1,000 employee range, how many of them are actually using agentic AI?
A lot of them are. We do a lot of work with mid-market clients, smaller firms. I was just and here's something really interesting. I was just at Gartner's Data and Analytics World in March of this year, and there was a lady that did a presentation. She had a company that had 300 employees. She was doing $1 billion in revenue, and the company had 30 humans, 270 agents deployed in the workflow. So size is really not an indication. Oh, and they were doing $1 billion in revenue, so take $1 billion. So the metric that really matters, and I'll make a note of this as we go into the agentic world, is revenue per employee, revenue per real human employee. That's the metric that will speak to the board of directors and to the C-suite about how AI is impacting the value stream of a business. Okay, but yes, mid-market companies are definitely right for agentic transformations because that will allow them to scale much faster and grow their business without having to grow headcount. Question in the back, yeah?
Well, the same thing you said, if somebody in the C-suite.
A little bit louder.
Okay, somebody wants to bring this new metric that is the revenue
Per employee, right.
Yeah, how does that affect the workforce in terms of considering recs and hiring interns, recent graduates, people that we deal with in the past?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I'll have a satisfactory answer. I'll tell you what I think. We, like I mentioned, within the IT profession, so I was a software engineer out of college, and I've been in the field my entire career. And I've never seen a period where we needed fewer. So what are we doing to adjust what that means to the labor force? And I think smart leaders in technology are figuring out how to scale faster, but that's requiring reskilling and rethinking. And so I think a part of this is human change management oriented. As you think about what are the implications for your labor force, where you can apply these solutions to increase economies of scale and drive costs down. And sometimes that's in the form of labor reductions, physical headcount reductions. But how can you also think about the human capital change management exercises that allows you to repurpose that workforce and move it into in different jobs. Over the course, and this is something that is easy to lose sight of, but over the course of, I was just thinking the other day. Anybody remember the Garmin navigation device when navigation came out? We all rushed and bought a Garmin because it was just necessary. We had to have it, right? And then all of a sudden, the navigation device turned into an app for a smartphone. And so that cannibalized the whole garment market. And so what happened to that labor force? It got redeployed into other elements of technology and innovation. We just have to be thinking about I think the smart leaders are thinking about how do we ride the wave of what's happening throughout the economy and society as we use technology. I can tell you though, I really do think this is a period of time it's a tectonic plate shift in the way the world works that we're in right now.
This isn't a question, it's just a point to make though, but a while back, the prior
Since you're going to make a point,
the prior CEO of AT&T had gone on this push that he wanted to uptrain all the employees across the entire company and have them train into learning coding and that sort of thing a little bit before the AI push. His brother worked as a guy who laid fiber in the ground his entire career. When his brother was interviewed by 60 Minutes or one of the media outlets, his brother's like, nope, I'm not going to do that. And I think that's the problem between your example of retraining employees with Garmin and this one is what you're going to run into is there will be a large resistance, either just because of inertia or whatever, to retraining employees, and a lot of those employees will end up without positions to work for. And the younger ones who come in need to jump on this from day one, or need to target things where there's a personal touch involved, like nursing or something like that is much harder to be replaced.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. And I do think that the economy and society in general, as it moves through the generations, right, has different needs for how humans operate, live, and work. And it's easy to not see that. I think about myself at 68. I've tried to retire a couple of times, not very successfully. I mean, I never left the job, I just thought about it. Why are you laughing so hard in the back of the room? You can resemble that comment. But yeah, I just thought about it. How are we doing on time? Anybody know?
Yeah.
11 minutes.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of friends that did retire, instead of kind of moving forward and going through the transformation, people just kind of choose to move into the next phase of life. And that's happening every day in society. Young people are entering and older people are, exiting the workforce, and the skills are changing. The requirements for the jobs and skills are changing. Me personally, I plan to be around at 120. Still giving presentations on the latest technology. And I probably did a pretty good job. If I didn't have a bad toe, I'd do 100 push-ups for you guys. My toe hurts. Any other questions or comments? What's that?
Excuses.
Excuses? All right, here we go.
Let's go! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 7, 28, 9, 30.
Well, you guys ought to know the secret. I do 900 in the morning as a warm-up.
Can you do
3 sets of 300. I'm not even breathing hard.
Hey.
All right, round of applause.
Yeah.
Is this helpful? Was this talk helpful to you guys? Yeah. What you like most?
Push-ups.
How many sit-ups?
Oh, you want me to sit up now?
The framework, man.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions?
Could we get you slides? Are you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, we can do that.
Yeah. Just connect with me after, guys.
Okay.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you obviously have a really intuitive understanding of all kinds of learning models, GPT, Gemini, LLM. What would you tell a layman that wants to start? Where would you have them start in order to be able to gain more understanding of what you're doing and agentics, etc.? But start from scratch. where would you go tell your past self to start?
That's a good question. So if you want to just learn what the technology is and what it's doing, Udemy, are you familiar with Udemy? It's a pretty cost-effective way to start taking classes, right? And you can get entry level all the way through more senior modules. There, if you're a little bit more aggressive, I know that eCornell has a program on AI. You could enroll in some of those modules. It's online. What else would I say?
Start with punch cards.
I wouldn't advise that. Although I do still have my assembler deck from my first assembler final with a dry rotted rubber band around it. And then I would just say get involved. I mean, these models the LLMs are just leapfrogging each other every day. And today, what I do is whenever I think about something I need to do personally, it's AI first. I just go there for everything.
Do you find that the specificity of like GPT versus Claude for coding versus Gemini, I mean, is there really that much of a difference between those models, or could I use, I mean, like you said, they're leapfrogging each other. I know each of them have different tracks.
Yeah, today Claude Code is the kind of de facto standard, but that'll change. Next month it'll be something different. I would say if it's coding Claude today, but a month from now if you're asking me, I'd probably say something different. We use Google Anti-Gravity, which is actually pretty powerful. That's what I would say. Here's the last thing I will say then. You guys have been the absolute best audience I have talked to all day long. And the only one. So give yourselves a round of applause.